Hey everyone, welcome back. It's basketball season, and here on Expanding the Zone, I'm Shane Combs. He's Matt Combs. We're excited to break it all down for you. And Matt, I think, as we said on last week's preview show, that we were ready to start our basketball series and get going here. And we think we have a really, really good one here on show 60 basketball rule changes coming up, as always. Thank you, Dr. Chris Good. Appreciate all of you supporting on the YouTube channel and watching us, or if you listen to your podcast, you can get us wherever you find those out there on all your different apps. And we will be doing some different things through basketball where we'll be sharing the screen and showing some different things. So throughout the basketball series, you may want to check us out on YouTube if you have not come over on that side before. But Matt, we're real excited to get going. I want to jump right into it, not waste any time. We're talking the basketball season. Scrimmages are about ready to wrap up. By the time this show gets out, we're going to have a lot of girls' games that count, boys' games right around the corner. So happy Thanksgiving, happy basketball season to all. Why don't you jump right into us and for us and tell us a little bit about the rule changes and some of the different things that's bringing on this show topic, this particular show.
We've talked over the course of doing this show from time to time, depending on what the topic we were tackling was, about rule changes in sports, right? About how sports can make improvements. We did a show, I think it was episode 30, State of the Game in basketball, a while back. And in that show, I encourage people to go back and listen. Um, we talked about some of the rule changes that maybe other sports like volleyball made over the years that has helped its sport, and some of the rule changes that maybe basketball could make. And we had a major rule change this year that we want to dive into. And then there was some other minor ones, and then there's some rules on the horizon. So, yeah, I don't know for sure which sport or which rule change you want to start with, Shane, but we just want to kind of dive into those today. Because one thing, remember, we talked about last week is we're going to be doing this basketball only season, right? In our Expanding the Zone, we want to do some things that not only a lot of what we do is for coaches or leaders, but we also want to help just the fan who's going to go watch games too to understand what they're seeing. Like what's this new rule we're seeing this year? Why is it in place? So those are some of the things we want to dive into today.
Well, from where I'm sitting, and as people start to watch the game, I think the most obvious one has to be the free throw situation. A lot of the free throw situation, I know that we've talked about for years and years and years as coaches, and on some podcasts, and on this particular podcast. Um, that's probably going to be the one most noticeable. I think it's the one that the fans are going to notice the most. I certainly think players and coaches will notice it, and I think it'll be interesting to see how officials react to it. So why don't we start there? Why don't you explain to us a little bit in the free throw situation, some of the foul situation, how that's going to break down here in the upcoming season?
Yeah, so let's just start with the rule itself. Okay, so basically, for many years now, probably I don't know, close to 30-ish years. I'd have to look back. The team starts to shoot free throws on common fouls after the seventh team foul of a half. So people that have been watching basketball, unless you're old like us, that's probably all you remember is seven fouls sometime in the half. Your team goes to the line to shoot the 1-and-1, right? The bonus. Now there's been a couple different changes to that. One, there is no more 1-and-1s. Every single free throw in high school basketball, no matter what it's for, whether it's on the shot, whether it's just out in the middle of the floor, it's a two-shot foul, right? Any free throw or any free throw situation is going to be two shots. No more bonus. The other big part is instead of seven fouls and a half now, it the common foul free throws start after five fouls and a quarter. So let's say you're in the first quarter, right? You're playing. There's a minute left. That's the team's fifth foul. That team that got fouled would go to the line and shoot two free throws. Now, the interesting part of this is At the end of that first quarter, using that same scenario I just discussed, at the end of that first quarter, the fouls would be wiped off the board, and it would be 0-0 in the fouls to start the second quarter. Then the whole process starts over again. That is the rule. All right. And I think, Shayne, what I'd like to do first, and I'll even let you go first on this if you want. I want to discuss two things. I want to discuss first, you know, the benefit of that rule. Okay, why that rule was put in place, maybe. Do you like it? Let's just discuss some of those things. I know you and I, if you go back and listen to that episode 30, State of the Game, this was one of the rules we wanted, right? But we there's parts of it that we probably like. It's not absolutely perfect, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But this was a rule that we thought would help, and we can talk about why we think it would help. Now, before you answer, Shayne, let me just share my screen here, and so that the people watching on our YouTube feed can read along with us. And I'm going to read this rule. All right, and then we can dive into this a little bit. This is actually from the National Federation of High School. Okay, so just so people understand that the NFHS adopts rules or approves rules or whatever, or creates rules, then the OHSAA can then adopt those rules, take those rules on in its association. So here's what the NFHS said: the rules committee, I'm starting right here, studied data that showed higher injury rates on rebounding situations and saw this as an opportunity to reduce opportunities for rough play during rebounds. Now we can talk about that in a minute, right? Go on down. Additionally, resetting the fouls each quarter will improve game flow and allow teams to adjust their play by not carrying foul totals to quarters 2 and 4. All right, Shayne. So you have at it here. Where do you want to start with this?
Well, I'm a glass half full type of guy, so I'll certainly start on the positive because I don't see how basketball people cannot view this as far more positive than negative. It's a situation where, as athletes have become bigger, faster, stronger, the games naturally get more physical. Over the time when I played, when I first started coaching to now, the girls' games right there, following that same trend. And what's happening is the game with these athletes banging around and going off the dribble and playing an aggressive style of defense and obviously 50-50 balls and you're competing hard, kids playing really hard, you get a lot of contact, you get a lot of fouls, and
Right.
and I do think this gives us an opportunity to simply call the game in a different way. And the reason I say that, the one place, Matt, I've always defended officials is I do think it's extremely difficult in the old format to balance how many fouls you're going to call, because what would happen is if you called it too tight, people be like, oh, let them play, let them play, let them play, right? But on the other side, if you didn't call anything at all, it started to become so physical you couldn't even hardly play offense. So what was
Right.
happening is officials would come out and they would get caught in rocking the hard place. I've seen it both ways. I've seen officials come out and set the tone and call a bunch of fouls in the first 4 or 5 minutes. Well, now they're that officiating crew that set themselves up to be shooting that bonus the rest of the half because, as you said before, it didn't reset at the end of the first quarter.
Right.
Where I've seen it the other way. Well, I don't want to be that in that situation. So what I'll do is I'll come out, we'll let them play and just beat the heck out of each other for the first 7, 8, 9 minutes, and then maybe we'll have some room to call some fouls in the second quarter. What I like about this is it allows them to come out, not have the fear of blowing the whistle from the jump, and then resetting it at the end of the first quarter. And I think ultimately the adjustment will come in the player and the coaches from an individual foul trouble. So I honestly think that if officials are able to use this in the correct format, the number one reaction I have in answering your question could probably be more individual foul trouble than what some people are used to, because I think officials will feel, I hope they feel, more of a freedom to call the game as they see it or to call fouls throughout the course of all four quarters instead of feeling like they have to pick and choose the quarters.
Yeah, no, I don't know that I could say it any better than that, Shane. I think the best part of this rule and why we've always wanted this rule, you and I, and look, it's not like we came up with this like we're some kind of geniuses, guys. It's been proven that it works. I mean, if you look at how much the NBA game has been cleaned up physically compared to when we watched it back when Michael Jordan and the Pistons were beating the crap out, you know what I mean, back in the day. It's and now a lot of people don't like NBA, and that's a whole other thing. That's fine if you don't enjoy that type of thing, but the NBA game is a smoother, more free-flowing game today than it was back in our, childhood when it was a lot of physicality, a lot of fights. Free, you look at the NBA scoring is up. Again, if you go back to episode 30, I keep referring to that, but go back to episode 30 when we did State of the Game, Shane. We talked about the fact that free throws in the last 30 years in high school basketball, scoring is down 20 points a game. Fouls were down 11 a game. 16 less free throws a game. Okay. And all that adds up to not as many fouls are being called, not as much scoring. The game's not as fun to watch. The game's not as fun to play. All right. And we've talked about that, especially with girls basketball and how some of the numbers have suffered, right? Just because, and I think physicality adds to that. When I talk to some girls, I mean, they've literally told me that. So, I mean, obviously there's a host of other reasons too, but what I'm saying is we've needed this for a long time to encourage, like you say, officials to call fouls. Because bottom line, more fouls have to be called. The game is just too physical, and it's hurting the game in several areas. Now it's going to take officials some time to adjust to this because guys who have officiated a long time are in their own habits, right, of the way they sort of officiate a game. But I would like to think that over time this season, some of those officials are going to be like, you know what? I can loosen up and call a few more fouls because we're not going to just have a free throw shooting contest here. There's 4 minutes left in this quarter. If I call four fouls in the last 4 minutes, we're still not shooting free throws here, and then it resets and it goes to the second quarter. I'm hoping that's kind of the attitude officials take because I really think with today's athletes and how good our athletes are today, I think if more fouls are called, you're going to start to see a prettier game. You're going to start to see a finesse game, some game where skill sets are really showed off, Shane, and I think that's going to be um, more fun for everybody. Now let me say this, and if you have something else on that, you can chime in here, okay? But let me say this because this was one of the things too when you and I did the show on rule changes, and even in the State of the Game show, we talked about this a little bit. You and I have always been super opposed to the two-shot double bonus. Okay. And you and I, you even joked one time and said the bonus is just a way to give or the double bonus is just a way to give a bad free throw shooter another shot, right? If he couldn't make the first one. And so the double bonus and the reason it was put into place was laughable many years ago. Remember, it was supposed to prevent fouling at the end of the game. Like there won't be as many fouls. Oh, but we're losing by 6 points, so we're just going to quit fouling because you get two shots, and we'll lose by six. I mean, it made no sense when they put it in place, honestly. Um, and in a lot of ways, it still makes no sense. But in this case, they decided to do away with the 1-on-1, keep the two-shot foul, which I would have personally liked to seen this rule put in place with the 1-and-1. All right. But the college women's game, the pros, they don't do that, right? Everything's a two-shot. So I think there was some of that when you don't want to reinvent the wheel. So you're looking at, okay, we're going to make this rule change. How has it been successful in other places? You also had an interesting take on the two shot, Shane. And I know you've been anti double bonus like I have, but you had an interesting take on why you think one of the reasons they put they kept this at two shots instead of the 1-and-1. Why don't you explain that?
Well, I just think anytime you start to put a rule change in, a lot of times you're looking to take out gray area. And I don't think they're looking at it from number of free throws being shot or what's good for situational basketball or anything like that. I my first reaction was this was a way to eliminate one more controversy, one more argument, one more fan getting mad, one more coach yelling. And that's simply of was the foul in the act of shooting. I'm
Right.
driving to the hole. I sense the contact. I start to get that up, or the thing that's carrying down. We still haven't taken it to the level of the NBA, but the thing that has worked its way down to the college game and into high school is that continuation, right? Where you're in the act of driving and you're trying to get the shot up, contact comes on the bump, you get the shot up. Well, then is it an and one? Is it a all those different things? And I think this takes the controversy out of it in a lot of areas because that's just two shots.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I honestly, until you literally, and we've talked about this before, we don't do a lot of pre-show prep, right? But we literally this morning, just as we were getting our cameras ready here and getting, we were just briefly discussing like what we were going to talk about, and you brought that up, and that's fascinating. I never thought about that angle of what you're saying, but I do think, and you know what? That makes me accept the two shot a little bit more, honestly, because I'm okay with that. And, I'm okay with, we've never pulled punches on this show when we talk about officiating, we talk about coaching, and we've tried to be brutally honest. But in the officials' defense, if it's something that can help them,
Mm-hmm.
I have no problem with it, right? I mean, I have no problem with just going with the two-shot foul in
And
that
I guess you
situation.
still have that situation on an and one, correct? I mean, because so you would have to determine, I guess, if a guy's driving, scores, and gets fouled, I mean that way. I
Well,
guess you
yeah,
still
yeah,
have fouls,
you would have to determine whether to count the basket, I suppose.
right? So
Sure,
that's
you're
an
going to have
active
some of
shooting
that,
still,
but
yeah.
right, but that would be a little more rare than I
Sure.
mean, that's not going to happen quite as much as
No, no, no.
now. I have to. I can't help myself here, but to address the other part of this here, I've got to share this again. Okay, so
Hey,
this
to
right.
our credit, we did start very positive, I
Yeah,
will
we
say.
went positive, but I got to go here. I'm sorry, Lindsay Atkinson here for the NFHS. This here's a good one. The Rules Committee studied data. Now, I'd love to see this data, by the way, okay, that showed higher injury rates on rebounding situations and saw this as an opportunity to reduce opportunities for that was worded funny for rough play during rebounds. Now, Shayne, look, you know, in my 2.5 decades as a head basketball coach, I got to be honest with you. I I did not notice a rash of injuries on rebounding free throws. Okay, first of all, there's a rebounding situation on every single possession of the game. Every single shot, there's kids boxing out in anticipation of a miss. And on free throws, there's going to be a rebounding situation. I mean, are they trying to say because on a 1-and-1 you might have to box out twice? Like you might think the first one's going to be missed and then the second. Even so, are you kidding me? I mean, like, am I wrong? Did in the? I know you coached here recently in the girls' game. Was there a bunch of injuries on free throw rebounds? I mean, to me, that's. I mean, are we just making something up there to try to avoid saying, "Hey, we need officials to call more fouls"? You know what I mean? I don't know. Yeah, I just had to get your take on that one.
Well, again, I guess it goes back to when you've wanted a rule change. Like I think about in your workplace, right?
Yeah.
All the man. I wish they changed that. Wish they changed that. I wish they changed that. I wish they changed that. And then you go wrong and you talk about why you think they should change it. And once it comes to the time where it actually gets changed, it's almost like you don't even care about the reason. You know what I mean? So like
Right.
when I read that, my first reaction, I'm not trying to be rude at all about it. It's my genuine reaction of, yeah, I don't get that, but I don't, whatever. At least they changed the rule. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
For me, Shayne, it's almost like when it's. I'd almost flip what you were saying too. It's almost like if, like, say at school, say the teaching staff wanted a rule change forever, right? And man, every year went by, they didn't change it. They didn't change it. They didn't change it. And then all of a sudden, they change it. The person who changed the rule, they don't want to come out and say, "You've been right for the last 10 years, should have changed it." So instead,
Well,
they
we did
say,
some data study. You
yeah,
know what I
we
mean? Like,
we were right, but now after our data study, after our extensive research, like, because I mean, seriously, how much time did the National Federation pour in to rebounding study on free throws? I mean, did they have a commit? I mean, come on. I mean, it's like those things bother me because it's almost like they think that we're so dumb we buy that. Maybe that's just me personally being too sensitive to that. I mean, I just like don't give me that. Don't feed me that and expect me to be like, oh, okay, because I'm not buying that. Anything else, Shayne? I know we've got a couple other interesting things this year. Well, we've got one other interesting change this year, and then a couple maybe on the horizon. But I don't want to go away from this free throw. If you have anything else on this,
Not a
did we cover it?
lot. There was just a little few things, and I don't even know if they're worthy of long discussion, but they are worthy of mentioning.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I do think there's some time and score in the fourth quarter, from a standpoint of it may not be as common to be down 7, 8, 9 points, around that 3.5 minute mark, and maybe still not being the bonus when we talk about fouls to give and so forth, because starting the quarter over, um, depending on how the game unfolds in that first 3 to 4 minutes of the fourth quarter. Usually, by the time you get to the 3 minute mark, both teams were probably in the bonus in the fourth quarter.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
I think you could have a few more fouls to give, some of that situational basketball. And again, that's again, maybe just not a huge discussion, but certainly worthy of mentioning. Just something to watch early in the year to see if you notice more of those situations. Hopefully, again, uh, officials. Feel a little bit more freedom to just blow the whistle consistently. We always use that word, but in defensive officials, I think I just watched, some incredible college basketball game the other night, Purdue and Tennessee, and they just beat the heck out of each other. Well, Purdue
Mm.
shot like literally, like I'm not exaggerating. I don't have it in front of me. I think they shot like 48 free throws, and people were losing their mind. But you're watching this game, and you're like, these two teams are just, I mean, beating each other to death. And I, I don't know what as an official you're supposed to do in the
Well,
same
no, no,
tournament.
you're supposed to call the foul, and they did.
Yeah, well, in the
I mean,
same tournament, Marquette and Kansas walk out. Marquette plays a little bit of the same style of defense as Tennessee in a lot of ways, from an aggressive, ball pressure, bump the cutter, do a lot of different things. And that game, that game didn't get called. It didn't get called the same. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, that's amazing, from one game to another, just the difference in how. So I guess my point is, I've watched a lot more college. The women's game here with the Clark girl at Iowa was tremendous, and just as a college game goes, I really enjoy the women's college game as well. And I really like some of the flow I'm starting to see. I'm hoping it can come down. The only other thing on my note, and I'd love to get this take from a coach's perspective, so I wanted to throw this at you while we're on it, is I mentioned it briefly in the intro answer: individual foul trouble. So if I think for the longest time, the officials didn't blow the whistle consistently because they were worried about the team fouls. Well, now that the team fouls have been adjusted a little bit by quarter, if they do call consistently, the thing that's going to show back up, that used to be a far, far more thing in our day, if you remember, is the individual foul trouble. And you learned real quick. I know you played for a high school coach that you had two fouls in the first half. There's a real good chance you're sitting to the half, right? So what did
oh,
you do as a player? You started to figure out, like, hey, I'm not fouling. You know what I
right.
mean? Like, so the individual foul trouble is the job of the player and the coach to adjust to the officials. And don't you think that could be something that you're going to, yeah, foul trouble's always been a part of the game, but that's just something here. If officials do kind of change the way they go about it, that could start to play more of a factor. And I'm okay with it.
Hey, yeah, that's a great point. I'm okay with it too, because here's what's going to happen. It's like anything else, right? People will adjust to the rule, to the law, to the whatever, you know what I mean? And they'll make that adjustment, whether it be in sports or in life, right? People will adjust. And so for so long, kids have had the sense that, hey, I can be really, really physical because they're not going to call half of what I'm doing. Well, now all of a sudden they get called, okay, and they go over to the bench and they have to sit there for 4 minutes. Okay, next game, they go over the bench, have to sit there for 3 minutes. Guess what? Eventually, it's just like you said. What we had to do back in the day was we had to adjust and not foul. I mean, like I remember a game. I had a game, an opening game. Now, what you'll see too, I encourage fans to watch and see how much, like a lot of times, first or second game of the year, how physical it can be. Because what happens is in scrimmages, and not even just scrimmages, but in practice, it gets really physical. And let's face it, in practice, you're trying to get your kids to play hard in the preseason, right? You're trying to teach them how to rebound. So it's almost in practice, sometimes it's almost a little over physical. And then kids carry that into games. I always noticed my team's gotten more foul trouble in game 1 or 2 because, and the other thing
Great point.
in scrimmages, Shayne, you don't foul out, right? You're in the gym at 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning.
Yeah.
Well, I just watched a girl. I just watched a girl at the preview the other night foul 4 times. Okay, now the game was only 2 quarters, and she only played about probably 9 minutes. She fouled 4 times. Okay, so so these kids are kind of in that mode. Well, the first game of the year, this would have been maybe 7, 8 years ago, maybe. Both teams, the team we were playing, I'm good friends with their coach. We talked about it later. We went to the locker room and like both of us were like, I think we had fouled 9 times. They had fouled 8 times, which that's uncommon, right? That's why we talked about this rule needing to go into place because typically officials didn't call that many. They couldn't help to call them that night because both teams were being just sloppy and physical and it was a mess. Well, guess what I told my guys at halftime? Quit fouling. I mean, if you're going to keep fouling, we're going to all be sitting. I mean, because I'm sitting over there. I was into my eighth, ninth guy on my bench because of foul trouble. Funny, I talked to the other team's coach after the game. Guess what he told his team at halftime? Quit fouling, you know. But you
Yeah.
know what players did? They adjusted. They went out after halftime and it was like, whoa, I just had to sit the bench for 3 minutes in the second quarter with 2 fouls. I'm going to not foul now. So no, your point is very well taken. I think at first it may show up, but I think just give it a time or two. Just give it a time or two where a player has to sit over there in foul trouble and they'll cut that stuff out.
When we talk about why we foul, to look at it from a coaching fundamental side of things, and this is something, we talk about data. In all
Yeah.
seriousness, I over the last half of my coaching career, I've coached for a couple um, different head coaches, and I've been more on the defensive side of the ball. So I've really started to chart, and probably the last 5 6 years I started doing this. I started to chart fouls, and then on film, why did we foul?
Right.
And Matt, I can tell you, almost as far as 90%, 90%. It didn't matter if it was a senior, it didn't matter if it was a freshman. The two reasons we foul, we're out of position or we lose our composure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, now, do you get a little nickel and dimer, we like to call it in basketball sometimes, or do you get one with the official like, hey, what'd she do or what did he do? Yes. But if you break it down, you usually get in that position because you're out of position, or it's the I missed the layup or I made a mistake and I just walked up and hacked the rebounder type thing, right? I lost my composure. That's an example. So the situation is it is a very coachable thing. It's something we're going to have to look. And I'm the first to admit, as the game has started to get more and more physical, I've looked for physical things to teach. Well, if those things are no longer allowed, guess what I'm going to do? I'm
Yes.
going to change the way I teach. Right now I'm going to kind of teach when we're fighting through a screen to take on your shoulder and blow the screen up, I call it. Why? Because again, I've charted and I
Right.
specifically looked at foul. They don't call it. You know what I mean? So it's
Right.
one of those things where I've defended officials on some of these things for a long, long time. The number one thing I'll be watching is just to see, do officials have more freedom in the first minute of the game, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, to just feel like, hey, I finally have a rule in place now where I can just call the game for 32 minutes and the players and coaches will adjust to me.
Well, and I think that's the biggest thing you just said. I really hope officials come out and call fouls early. I really do, because I think that really nips it in the bud. It's like anything else, you know what I mean? I feel like we've been backwards on this with foul calls. Imagine if you're a teacher and you go into your classroom the first day and you go in with the attitude of, man, I'm going to be really loose and easy on these guys, kind of let them do whatever they want for the first. And then at Christmas break, I'm going to, I'm going to set some tone. I mean, obviously that's silly, right? You go in the first day and you set a tone in hopes that you can loosen up later. We haven't been doing this in basketball and officiating. We if you look, way more fouls are called maybe early in the second half to mid third quarter than early in the game. And I would like to see us do that opposite. I would like to see more fouls be called in the first quarter so that we set that tone right out of the gate. And I hope this rule will allow officials to do that now, because let's face it, if they come out and let's just say for the sake of argument, they call 10 fouls, 5 on each team in the first quarter. And let's say that maybe each team shoots, 2 free throws, because maybe the last foul was called with a minute left, right? All of a sudden, I almost guarantee you in the second quarter, you won't have to call that many. You won't have to call that many in the second quarter. So yeah, I'm definitely hoping for that. I think those are some good points, Shane. One other rule I want to hit, because this is different this year too, and fans may be interested in this. Obviously, coaches are going to be interested in it. For years and years and years, and I'm talking forever. I mean, back when we played, the tournament seeds for the sectional tournament, district tournament, were based on the vote of coaches, right? You get together right at the end of the season. It used to be face to face. The last few years it's been electronically, but you get together and you vote for seeds. Who's the 1 seed? 10 schools voted for, 10 coaches voted for this school. They're the 1 seed, and the 2 seed, and 3. Now, the OHSAA is trying to go more of a route like they do with football. And most people are familiar with the computer points in football, right? You're checking them every week. Where do we rank? So they're going with a system now of sort of a power index or an RPI type thing of based on your schedule, based on your winning percentages. Let me first, and I don't want to get out ahead of ourselves, Shane, but let me first, and I'll jump over to this. So what the OHSA has decided to use is this here, the Max Preps. Some people might be familiar with Max Preps. It's a website that typically has like schedules. Some people put stats on it. Volleyball's been using it for a while now with all their stuff. We can discuss the pros and cons of Max Preps, but the idea behind this is they're going to use this formula, and here's basically this formula right here, and we'll discuss a little bit of this. They're going to use this formula as the selection process for where teams are ranked. Okay, so it's going to be cut and dry like football. Here's where you rank. Here's where you go on the bracket. All right. So, and in the Southeast District, I'm sure is still going to use their NCAA seeding, which, they've never really went away from that. So this will just be, this will be how it is. If you're the 1 seed, you're going to go on there and play the 16 seed or whatever. Okay. So, Shane, we can discuss the nuts and bolts of this here in a few minutes. Let's first just start with, do you like the idea? Let's just start real basic here. Do you like the idea of a different process to do tournaments? I mean, other than the coaches vote, are you in favor of this, or are you one that like the coaches getting together and voting on it?
I don't hate it. I think it's a step in the right direction. I worry about some of the motivation behind it. I worry about some of the business side of it behind it. From just the actual coaching part of it. I've been in rooms before, Matt. I can remember one time I was an assistant coach actually this year. We had 7 coaches from this conference, 7 coaches from this conference,
Mm-hmm.
and then 1 poor coach from another conference.
Yeah.
And I'm not exaggerating. Every single vote for whatever it was that year, like all those seeds came down to that poor coach's vote every time. You see what I'm saying? Like
Right.
that wasn't the coach's highest integrity hour. Yeah, but that was the game.
Right.
that was the game that was played, and the phone calls and the emails and the different things and the meeting before you go in the room and all those different things. And it's just like your head would spin, and it would. There's so many factors that go into it, and I'm not saying there haven't been a lot of times coaches have got it right. I mean, they have,
Mhm.
but at the end of the day, let's face it, you're trying to go in there and you're trying to be as fair as possible, but you're there to advocate for your team. You know what I mean? For to try to put your team in the best position possible within the policy that's and within the rules that are being used. So I do think this is a step in the right direction. I do
Right.
think we have the technology. I've said before, we have the technology to put some of these things in place, and that everybody knows the system a little bit and so forth. So step in the right direction. Don't love all the details, and I think there's room to iron those out in years to come. My biggest issue is probably a little bit of the behind the scenes motivation, business side of all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, couple things there. I agree with you. Um, I agree with you, Shayne. I think I do like the general idea of of something other than the coaches' rankings, right, or the coaches' votings to determine this. You know, I think the trick is to come up with the right system, and I don't know that we've done that yet. Now, like most things, you probably never come up with the perfect system right away. Hopefully, over the years, we tweak this and it gets better. A couple things. One, with max preps, okay, I'm a little concerned about max preps being the thing where we use their rankings on this. All right, for a couple reasons. One, max preps has a history of not being super accurate here. Let me show you an example. Um, I'm going to share this screen, Shayne. I don't know if you can see this or not. Are we good? Can you see
Yeah,
this?
yeah.
This is Vinton County Vikings boys basketball, right? Where I coached for many years. You see Vinton County's basketball staff. This is current. You go down here, Matt Holmes, the head coach, which I haven't been the head coach there last year or this year. Nathan Lamb, good friend of mine. Yeah, I really, really respect Nate, radio guy there for years, did a podcast. Never been the head coach, never been a junior high coach, never been on staff in any way. And here's Terry Hale, who Terry's a longtime, coach on our staff, freshman coach, guy that's done a lot. He's the golf coach there. Just using that as an example right here. So if Max Preps can't get this right, okay, I have a little concern as to whether they can get the rankings right. So that's my first thing, and I put that on there not to be nitpicky, but just to show like you're using a thing here that like when you're using a national deal, like a national organization to rank your local teams at the state level, I'm afraid some things could get missed. Okay, like with the Joe Itel rankings for football, it's been centered around Ohio, right? And over the years, because of that, I think it's been fine tuned and it's worked the way it's pretty much supposed to work. Now, I will say this: as we jump back into this formula, okay, and what's interesting, I want to describe the difference, Shayne, here between Joe Itel and the RPI for Max Preps. Okay, so let's look at this. This formula, if you look at this, that they're going to use for basketball, they're going to take 40% of your winning percentage. That's what WP is here. Okay, so 40% of your winning percentage as a team. They're going to take 35% of your opponent's winning percentage and add that to it. And then 25% of your opponent's winning percentage. So it'd be like in football, those second level, right? Those types of things. Now, here's the difference between this and Joe Itel. And then I want to come back to you, Shayne, and have you give your take on this. For football, and this has always been my beef a little bit with the football rankings, right? In football, you get 0 points. I'm talking no credit for playing a really, really good team unless you beat them. All right. So let's just say that the Paint Valley Bearcats, small school, right? They went out and they played uh, Cleveland St. Ignatius. All right. I'm just going to try to be just totally over the top here, right? Or say they went and played Ironton, who's a powerhouse, or whoever. Okay. And they lost 31-30 in overtime. They get 0 points. Zero. Right. They get zero credit for playing a tough opponent, playing a close game. All right. And if they went and but if they go beat a terrible team, they get credit for that. They get points, right? My problem with the Joe Itel system, as it's always been, they don't get there's no credit for playing a tough schedule, right? You're people tend to think in football you get a benefit of playing a tough schedule. Not unless you win. You actually get more of a benefit if you play a mediocre to less than mediocre schedule, as long as you win. Okay. Because really, the way you rack up computer points is you play like small schools that win 7 or 8 games. That's a great way to rack up points. Like if you're a Division 4 football team and you can go beat a Division 6 team that goes 9-1, you're going to rack up points. A lot of people don't understand that about computer rankings in football. Because you get no credit, Shayne, for because you get no credit for playing or a close loss, let's say, to a really good team, the points in my mind are skewed. All right. So a couple years ago, the school I'm at, Uniota currently, they had to play Clinton Massey, who's a powerhouse every year in football, high school football, right? State champions. And they were a 13 seed out of 16. Well, they weren't a 13 seed. Trust me, watched them play. I mean, this team they were good. But you look at their schedule, they had lost to Columbus DeSales. They had lost to somebody else. They started the season 0-4 against really, really good, bigger schools. Well, guess what? They get 0 points for that. So what happens is at the end of the year, the points in football are skewed. You've got these teams that are 12, 13, 11, really should be 3, 4, 5, but they're not getting any credit for the tough schedule that they played because they weren't able to win that game. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Now, this particular system in basketball does give some credit for that, which I like. If you look at it, they're giving credit for the winning percentages of opponents. All right. So you are getting some credit for that. But I think my beef with it is, and I don't want to get too far out ahead here, is that they probably need to be more spread out. I think 40% for your own winning percentage and 35% for your opponents is too close. I'd like to see it be more like 60% for your winning percentage, 30% for your opponents, and maybe 10% for your opponent's opponents. I mean, right now it's a step down of 40, 30, 25. To me, that could be a little different. But let's start, Shayne. I don't want to throw too much. Let's start with just, do you like a system that gives credits for tough opponents, even if you don't beat them, or do you like the way football does it and you have to beat them?
Well, that's a great question. I think I like some credit. I think the first reaction to what you just went over there, and you did a really good job of breaking that down. I think that's a little too much when it starts becoming that close to equal in terms of your own performance. I still would like to see a bigger chunk based on how you perform. It's kind of like the Jay Billis thing every year at March Madness, right? It's like I don't care quite as much about who you played. I care about who you beat. You know what I mean? Like
Right, right.
it's one of those things. So I like some credit. I don't know that I like it being equal to in terms of the performance of the team that you're evaluating. Because at the end of the day, you do have control over, well, like in basketball, most conferences are going to make anywhere, what, Matt, a half to 70%. 70 now with the 22 games is probably high,
Mm-hmm.
but somewhere between 50 and 70% of your schedule is your conference. And then so you
Right,
have a decent amount of control over who you play and when
right.
you play them on the basketball side, where um, so that is interesting, and I think it's like anything. Once this becomes the norm for a year or two, well, then we go back to so many things we've talked about before: the AD coach relationship. What's your strategy and scheduling?
Mhm.
How does that look? But yeah, I think you did a good job there. My first reaction, it's like a little higher percentage on the team's win percentage. I'd like the credit in terms of different from football. um, I hate to see that number get too high in terms of relation to the actual team's win percent.
Right. And I just put that back up there just so the people on our YouTube feed could look at it again. But it steps down 40, 35, 25. I think, like you just said, Shane, I think that number may have to be tweaked to make it accurate.
Now explain that 20. I don't know that you went that far. Then, so explain this other 25% because I think that factors in there a little
Well,
bit.
so okay, let's just put names on schools here. Let's use your school, Paint Valley. Okay, so let's say that that whatever their record is, they their winning. Let's just say their winning percentages, 750. All right, they would get 40% of that winning percentage. Okay, you would add that to 35% of all their opponents' winning percentages combined. So everybody Paint Valley's played, right? Well, then, and this is where you'd have to have a computer doing it for you, right? Every team that Paint Valley has played, every team that they have played, all right, 25% of their winning percentage. That's my issue is I think this number here, because you're getting two levels out now. You know what I'm saying? So like if Paint Valley played if Paint Valley played Vinton County, all right, and then Vinton County played, Belpre. Paint Valley may never in a million years play Belpre or know anything about Belpre or have any connection with Belpre. You know what I mean? So 25% to me is a little large there. I understand what they're trying to do, and I honestly am okay with it. I think this number here, Shane, needs to be lower, maybe 15, maybe even 10. I think this number's probably about right. This number needs to be higher. I guess that's what I'm saying. Can we up this number by 15 to 20? Can we drop this number by 15ish? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
so maybe even like I said, maybe a 60, 30, 10. To me that might be, but again, I'm not a math genius here, okay, by any
Right.
stretch. And I maybe let's give credit to Max. Maybe Max Preps has looked into this. Maybe they've really delved into this formula. That they're saying that this RPI formula is used by the NCAA and AIA. I'd be interested to know if it's the same exact formula. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
it is. Okay. Um,
I
so
think it's a way. I think it's a way to really. I don't know if expose is too strong a word, but I think it can expose, well, I guess in a good and bad way, your conference. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Like you can probably get a lot of credit for that. Like I know, for example, in SVC volleyball, we talk about here in our area a lot of times. It's always fun to go out and look at their non-conference record as a conference. It's unbelievable almost every year, and it doesn't matter if it's the first place team or all the way down to the bottom team. In fact, sometimes teams 4 through 8 have a better record than the first two or three, depending on who they're playing.
right,
So I think it does that. The other analogy I've used a little bit, Matt, it's kind of like the competitive balance. I think it's a step in the right direction for what they're trying to correct. There's always the elephant in the room on what we're trying to do here,
right,
and we don't like to just come out and say it. But like competitive balance, I think we understand throughout the private and the public schools and the different things on what we're trying to do there. It's a step in the right direction. It still needs some work.
mm-hmm.
Um, and maybe that even transitions into something you're going to bring up here in a little bit. But I guess that's this thing here is the draw, especially as we started to stretch out into these bigger super sectionals and different things. Like the draw was flawed. I mean, if I'm being honest, as
Oh,
a
there's no
coach,
question. No
it
question.
just wasn't very good. So I have I applaud that we are trying something. I'm with you. I'm not smart enough to know all the math part of it, but the idea behind the formula
Mm-hmm.
is at least a starting point. And I think we watch, I think we learn, and I think we adjust.
Yeah, no, it is. Like you said, the current system has been flawed for what you said. You're having coaches vote, so there's league. So there's this idea that you have to vote with your league. It puts a lot of pressure on coaches, because coaches that are trying to do it the right way and ethically, they get put in a bad spot because other coaches aren't doing it the right way. Let me give you an example. I mean, maybe the fans just enjoy this story. I'll just come right out and say it. I don't care. It's been long enough now. Years ago, I mean, people were Joe Burrow fans around here, right? Athens had the teams they had with Joe Burrow. They were really, really good in every sport at that time because, believe it or not, Burrow arguably for a couple years wasn't even their best basketball player. Okay. That's how good they were. Um, Other teams, Logan Elm, Warren, during this stretch is like always, they were good. I got put in a situation one time in a room where I had to vote. There was a big controversy as to who was going to be the number one seed. Okay, between Logan Elm and Athens, and even Warren kind of wanted to stick their nose in that because they'd had like 3 losses, but they were to bigger schools. Like they went up and played some Columbus schools. Um, well, Logan Elm had beaten Athens. Okay, now think about this. Logan Elm had beaten Athens on Athens's home floor. All right, early in the year. Now, Athens' argument was, well, we had a long football playoff run, and all this and all that. So we weren't really in basketball mode yet. Well, I sat there and watched the game. I went and scouted. Okay. With my own eyes, I watched Logan Elm beat Athens on the road. All right. Well, we get to the tournament draw. Logan Elm has a better record I think Logan Elm might have been undefeated. Athens lost 1, or maybe it was 1-2. I can't remember, but Logan Elm's record was better. All right. And they had beaten Athens on the road. Now, Athens is in my league. Okay. So Athens, I ended up voting for Logan Elm because ethically I felt like it was the right thing to do. If I'm being ethical, how do I not vote for the team that has a better record? Quite frankly, played in a better conference too. I mean, I'll be the first to admit the Mid-State League's a better conference than the TVC. It just is year to year. It's just a more, bigger schools and just better, I mean, they're up there playing Taze Valley at the time, Canal Winchester, all these teams, right? So Logan Elm has a better record. They beat Athens on the road. I vote for Logan Elm. All of a sudden, I'm unethical. I'm being called. I remember an Athens poster on a media guy who was also on Southeastern High Prep called me unethical for the way I voted. Like, are you kidding me? I voted ethically. I could have taken the easy way out and voted for my league school and probably caught less grief. But instead, I voted based on what I felt like was the ethical thing to do, right? My point to all that is I just hope people find an interesting story of how these things work in these rooms. These are the situation coaches are being thrown into in these votes, okay? And the kind of, honestly, crap that goes on in these rooms in terms of politics. And I mean, Shayne, you know it. You get phone calls all week. Hey, how you vote? I mean, yeah, every week with the tournament draw, I'd have coaches that I haven't talked to all year, right? Don't even know. All of a sudden reach out to me. Hey, how's things been going for you? Well, you don't care how things have been going for me. We haven't talked in 6 months. You know what I mean? Well, what are your thoughts on this draw? That's how they like to. What are your thoughts? Well, my thoughts are it sucks that we even have to do it. You know what I mean? That's my thoughts. But basically, they're wanting to know. And I mean, it'd be like, if you vote me the 3 seed, I'll vote you the 6 or the 7 seed. We don't have to play each other. I mean, am I wrong? I mean, I'm just being real here. This is the way it goes down. So I think that hopefully this will put some sportsmanship back into it. Maybe take away some of that stuff that coaches had to do every year. So from that point of it, I'm pretty happy about it.
No question. And things were getting away from that room, and they're getting online, and that added another thing to it. So look, this is a positive step. Like any formula will need to tweak it, but like that's a great story you're giving there. And anyone who's coached for any amount of time, pretty much any sport, probably has a similar situation that they've been in and can relate. So yeah, positive step. Just gonna be some patience on how it's gonna all work out over the next couple of years.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, Shayne, I wanted to, and before we get off here, and these aren't rule changes yet, but they're on the horizon, right? I wanted to let's take a minute to discuss a couple of these, if you don't mind. We've talked about shot clock before, right? We've talked about for years and years, right? There's been this, will shot clock be put into high school basketball? I've said this before. Let me explain this really quickly. The National Federation of High School, according to the OHSAA, they are not allowed to adopt a rule unless the National Federation allows them to adopt the rule. So the National Federation has to adopt the rule first, then the OHSAA can. Now, you might say, well, other states have had it. Well, those other states have basically, according to what I've been told, break away from the National Federation. So in other words, they don't get a seat at the table in the committee at the National Federation because their rules weren't aligned with the National Federation. I don't know if I'm explaining that too quickly or it makes sense, but basically, if you want a seat at the table, if you want to be a part of that committee, then you have to go by their rules. So now that the National Federation has opened it up, they've given the states permission to have the shot clock. Okay. So that is allowed now. Now, I don't know how quickly the OHSA plans on doing that or if they plan on doing that at all. But I could see, Shayne, my gut tells me we will see a shot clock within the next 3 to 4 years. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like it's on the horizon, uh, for Ohio. Now, I know we've talked about this at length in some of our other podcasts. So we don't have to go into it completely, but just your thoughts, general thoughts on the shot clock. Do you think it's coming? Do you agree with me on that? And if so, good thing, bad thing?
I think it's a great thing. Look, on probably a list of three or four things for about a decade now. Going back to the bonus that we talked about earlier in this show, and the shot clock, and some of the different things you're going to talk about with some divisions and so forth. I think basketball needs the shot in the arm. I go all the way back to. I know there's some people, some old school people that maybe don't love the 3-point line, but I think for the most part, if you go back to the late '80s, could you even imagine the game of basketball without the 3-point line and what it's
Right.
done for the spacing of the floor, and the way it's all set, the height advantage and all the different things. And I just think our game needs a shot in the arm. I can't say it enough. Volleyball, rally, scoring, football with all the extra divisions, all the different things, all these other sports are just evolving and getting better, and improving, and growing. And then basketball to me seems stuck in a rut. It's a great game and it's
Right.
fine, but it's just kind of like, what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we need a little bit of a shot in the arm. And I think I would argue that the different things that basketball did back in the late '80s just skyrocketed into the '90s and early 2000s. High school basketball, took all. I think basketball is still great, but I think it started to even out a little bit, flatten out a little bit. And I think as a result, some other sports, in terms of growth, have started to pass by. Maybe you don't agree with that, Matt. I just think that I think a little bit of a dress up a little bit could change the game for the good.
No, I agree with you. I do. I think it's something that we need. It's something now. It is something that we've got to make sure we're ready for because we have to have people to run those shot clocks, and we have to.
Sure.
I'd like to see the OHSAA maybe give schools at least maybe like a 2 year notice. Hey, we're going to do this. Um, you know, maybe even a lot that way schools can maybe even um, be able to use it in the summers, maybe to get used to it, maybe in some summer basketball, because you're going to have somebody to operate that shot clock. The other adjustment's going to be for officials. High school officials are going to have to get used to it too, because now all of a sudden they have to watch for the ball to hit the rim and some things that
Sure.
they didn't have to worry about
Sure.
before. So I do think the shot clock can help the game. I do think it might make life a little tougher on officials at first. It'd be interesting to know how officials feel about it. I don't know as a whole, what that organization would feel about it. But no, I'm with you. I think it's something that can really help. And I do, my gut tells me we will see it sooner rather than later, but who knows? Um, the other one, Shayne, that came out in an email to some coaches through a coaches association a while back, and I don't have any confirmation of this necessarily, other than just some talk that possibly the OHSA is thinking about adding divisions to some sports like basketball, maybe even other sports, right? Like baseball, volleyball, I don't know. Football has 7 divisions, as we know, right? Basketball has 4. You and I've talked a little bit about this before about how maybe they could benefit. You just mentioned it, right? Just now. Uh, how maybe we could benefit from adding divisions. I think that it's been 4 for the longest time because it's a really neat, clean cut state tournament format, right? That's personally the way I feel why it's been that way. I mean, if you think about it, you play 4 games on Thursday and 4 games on Friday, and your 4 championship games are on Saturday, and it's like neat, clean. I think now maybe there's some thought of, well, one, let's just be real honest. The OHSA has kind of proven that they're trying to make as much money as possible here in the last couple of years. If you look at ticket prices and that whole controversy, right? The fact that we've expanded football playoffs to 16 teams getting in, and we could talk about that all day long. But my point is, it's a way for the OHSA to increase revenue, truthfully, because they're going to have more state tournament tickets sold. I think it is a way to help certain schools. There are certain schools that fall right into that bubble to where they're at a competitive. You look at some of the Division I schools in our area, like Chillicothe or Logan, they're at a super disadvantage when they get into the tournament. They're really, really small for Division I. And then you could say that about every division, right? You're going to find a small Division II school or a small Division III school. So maybe expanding those divisions probably increases competitive balance, makes for more state tournament games. Yeah, I don't see a super negative to it. In fact, I think I would kind of like to see it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, again, I've always pushed for the fifth division. I'm hearing six and seven. Again, that might be a bit much, but again, I think that the I guess what I say, Matt, the positives outweigh the negative. It's a situation where I've coached for 25 years at a school where in our league, we're the smallest school in our league, and when you go all the way to the top of our league, you're talking like 2.5 times the enrollment.
Right.
It's a big deal. I've coached in a baseball program where we've been the smallest Division III school in Ohio, and we've been the biggest Division IV school in Ohio. And I'm telling you, there's two different things here.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
guarantee you.
Like it's just it is. So it's a the state makes their money, they get those opportunities, but I guess what I'm saying is it also gives more competitive balance. It gives more schools an opportunity to compete for sectional titles, for district titles, for regional titles, to go and have that special Final Four run. And what does that do? It showcases your sport throughout. You're telling me when the football playoffs back in the day when you couldn't even make the playoffs, and then when it got to 8, some more people had an opportunity. Well, now everybody's making the playoffs, and there's different opinions on that. But what I'm seeing is I'm seeing more and more communities excited about playing Week 11 football, and the sport of
Right.
football will grow in those areas. For
Right.
the longest time, the elite program, so to speak, kind of had a monopoly. What I argue is this gives you an opportunity. You just said it earlier, you know, Clinton Massey was a 13 seed. Well, they wouldn't even been in the playoffs in a top 8 format, right?
Right.
Uh,
Right.
so my point is there's going to be positives and negatives all over the place, but in a day and age where the dollar bill seems to run so much, I can't see what the negative on the OHSAA side would really be, and I do think it would give more of a truer competitive balance, which is something that the OHSAA has been trying to figure out for quite a while now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, Shayne, I agree with what you said. And I think I'll just go ahead and kind of give my final thoughts and then let you wrap things up. But for me, or if you have something else, we can talk about it too. I shouldn't cut you off. But for me, we talked about this on our rule changes show, a while back, or possible, rules that could be changed or whatever. When we discussed that, if you're going to grow your sport, you've got to have an open mind. You got to continually be thinking outside the box. You got to continually be questioning, right? And I think this is true even in leadership. If you're not constantly questioning why you do what you do and how you do what you do, then there's not a lot of growth that's going to happen. If it's just like, we've always done it this way and let's just keep it this way. And then there's not as much growth as to ask, well, are we doing it the absolute best way we can do it, right? I think good leaders question all the time, can we improve? And I think in our sports, questioning can we change rules to improve our game is always a good thing. So even if, like with this new free throw rule, right? Going back to the beginning of our show, even if it's not perfect, even if you think, well, like in my mind, I'd rather see the 1-and-1 than the 2-shot, or okay, but it's a step in the right direction, right? Even if it's not perfect, it's a change that can spark some improvement. And I think it's just like with the tournament selection, I'm telling you right now, tournament selection, there's going to be like, how in the world did that team fall there? There's going to be some of that, but it's still an improvement over the scenario I gave you as a coach when you're stuck in that room and having to deal with that. So I guess my final thought would be, kudos to the people who are at least looking at changing some of these things to improve the game.
Absolutely. When we go to show 61, we're going to be talking about officiating in terms of a topic that we'll be bringing up, and I'm going to be talking a lot about how the officials demand certain things from me as a coach, and as a coach, I'd like to demand certain things in return for them, and that relationship's so important to the course of high school basketball, and it's a relationship that more times than not has been a lot better than people think over the years. Uh, but when it comes to rule changes, the reason I mention that is because when it comes to rule changes, we can put rules in place. It still comes down to adult implementation. So it still comes down to a willingness to see it and execute it, the ability to adapt and adjust, and I think that's so important. People get so scared of change. Like you can change and then you can go back and you can change it back. Be like, oh wait, but that didn't work. We've had
Right.
examples of that over the time. But again, I don't think anyone's ever saying that like, oh man, get that 3-point line off the floor. It's ruining the game. You know what I mean?
Right.
Now there's some people when it first happened though
Oh
that did
yeah.
feel that way, right?
Yeah.
And there's still probably a percentage of people out there that be like, things ruined the game. Kids are out there jacking it up, and there's no
Yeah.
post play, and I respect that. But as a whole, people view that as a great change. Again, I hear very few volleyball people saying, "Hey, I'd really like to go back and score on the serve. Let's play to 15."
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
no, no,
Sign
no.
out.
People, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, side out. You know, bump set spike. You know what I mean?
Right.
No, it's so don't be afraid of the change. Take it on, understand the positives, understand the challenges that's going to come, but it's still going to take adult implementation. And I'm excited about basketball stepping out in front where, quite frankly, I think sports like volleyball, sports like football, some of those other sports have kind of been far more aggressive in
Mhm.
the last decade, and I'm excited to see basketball. Looks like they're really ready to try a few things that we've been knocking on the door with for quite a while. So, well, Matt, great show. Show 60. I think we're just going to love the basketball series. Check out our preview show last week. And then, obviously tonight talking rule changes. Next week, we're going to come back at you here talking with some of the officiating and some of the different things on that topic area. But thank you, Dr. Chris Good, for all the support here on the YouTube channel. Check us out if you're out there on the podcast app. Come on over, check us out here on the YouTube. We're going to have different things on the screen throughout the basketball series that I think add a little bit to the show here on Expanding the Zone. So he's Matt Combs. I'm Shayne Combs. We appreciate you listening to Expanding the Zone. We'll see you next week when we talk officiating.